The Galactic History seminar was the most boring class of the week. A soft blue light filled the circular lecture hall. Strange symbols from different alien languages glowed softly on the walls. The air was cool and still. About 30 students sat in the curved rows. They were from many different worlds. There were a few humans, their pink skin and round ears looking ordinary next to their classmates. One of these humans was a young man named Jin. He had dark hair and a calm face. Right now, he was not looking at the teacher. He was looking at the screen on his small desk. On it, he was drawing a design for a ship's engine. His hand moved quickly, making lines and shapes. This was much more interesting than the lecture. The teacher was Professor Kale. He was a Zelthorian. He was very tall and very thin. His body was covered in smooth gray plates that looked like stone. His arms and legs were long and moved in a way that seemed a little wrong to human eyes. His head was narrow and his eyes were large and dark like the eyes of a fly. They saw everything in many pieces at once. His voice was a low buzzing sound. The device around his neck turned this buzz into words they could all understand. The concept of conflict, Professor Kale buzzed, is a primitive societal driver. It is something that the great and wise civilizations of the core systems have grown beyond. It is a sign of a species that is not yet fully developed. In the front row, a Valerian student grunted in agreement. His name was Tharok. He was big. His body was covered in thick green scales. He had a heavy brow and a strong jaw. He looked like he was built for fighting. He sat with his arms crossed, looking very sure of himself. Professor Kale's many-faceted eyes moved over the class. They stopped on the small group of humans. "Let us take humanity as an example," he continued. There was a slight condescending tone in his translated voice. It was a sound the human students knew well. "Your history is a long list of fights. You fought over land. You fought over resources. You fought over ideas. Your entry into the Galactic Commons was only allowed after you promised to control these basic animal instincts. Your people often talk about your fighting spirit as your greatest strength, but I believe it is your biggest weakness. It is a dangerous thing from your past that you have not let go of." At his desk, Jin's hand stopped moving. The stylus froze above his drawing. He felt a heat rise in his chest. It was a feeling he knew. It was the feeling of being judged as less than someone else. It was the feeling of being called a savage just because his ancestors had to fight to live. The professor and others like him always said these things. They wrapped their insults in fancy academic words. They made it sound like a simple fact, not an opinion. Jin looked around the room. The other human students were looking down at their desks. They were pretending not to hear. Tharok the Valerian had a small, smug smile on his face. Jin took a slow, quiet breath. He could not let this pass. Not today. He pressed a button on his desk. A small light in front of him turned on, showing he wanted to speak. Professor Kale's head tilted. The blue light shimmered on his chitinous plates. "Yes, Jin? You have a question?" "It is not a question, Professor," Jin said. His voice was calm, but it was clear and strong in the quiet room. "It is a different point of view." The professor buzzed softly. "Go on." "You say that conflict is a sign of a primitive species," Jin began. "But I think you are only seeing one part of it. Conflict is not just about destroying things. It is also about the will to protect what you have. It is about the need to overcome a problem that seems too big to solve. It is about defending the people and the things you value. That fighting spirit is what pushed humanity to reach the stars. Our planet was sick. We were running out of space and food and clean air. We did not give up. We fought to find a new way. That same spirit is the reason we are sitting in this room today. We survived because of it." As Jin spoke, he saw Tharok's smile vanish. The Valerian's eyes narrowed. Professor Kale's body shifted. His plates made a slight clicking sound. It was a sign of annoyance. "That is a very predictable answer, Jin," the professor buzzed. "It is an emotional defense of your species' violent history. You prove my point perfectly. You began your journey into space with thoughts of battle, and now you begin a debate in my classroom with the same energy. You see conflict as your first answer." Jin felt his face grow warm. He opened his mouth to argue back. He wanted to explain that it wasn't about looking for a fight, but about being ready for one. But before he could say another word, a different voice cut through the air. It was a sharp, quiet voice from the desk right next to his. "He is not wrong, Professor." Everyone turned to look. It was Mirai. She was a human girl who sat next to Jin every day. She had long black hair that she kept tied back simply. She was quiet. In the whole semester, Jin didn't think he had heard her speak more than 2 words in class. She was always working, always focused. Her datapad was always full of notes and equations, not drawings like Jin's. Right now, she was still looking at her screen. Her fingers were still tapping on it, moving information around. She did not look up at the professor or the class. Professor Kale was clearly surprised. A human challenging him was rare. A human female doing so was unheard of in his experience. Miss Mirai, do you have something else to add to your classmate's emotional argument? Finally, Mirai stopped tapping. She looked up. Her eyes were dark and calm. They were not filled with anger like Jin's. They were cool and certain. She looked directly at Professor Kale's strange, multi-lensed eyes. Jin said that humanity began with a battle. He is right, she said. Her voice was flat and factual. But you are focusing on the wrong battle, Professor. The first and most important battle for humanity was never against other people. It was not a war over land or ideas. The first battle was against extinction, against the cold, against the predators that were stronger and faster than us, against hunger and disease and a planet that did not care if we lived or died. She paused, letting her words sit in the cool air. The whole room was silent. Even Tharok was listening now, his head tilted in curiosity. That is the battle we have been fighting for thousands of years, Mirai continued. And the data, Professor, the simple, clear data, shows that we are uniquely, fiercely good at winning that one battle. Our history is not a list of wars. It is a list of survivals. Professor Kale was silent for a long moment. His buzzing had stopped. He was just staring at Mirai. Jin looked from the professor's stunned face to Mirai's calm one. He felt a strange shift in the room. He had started a simple argument, a defense of his people. But Mirai had done something different. She had not just defended them. She had reframed the entire question. She had taken the professor's own tool, cold, hard facts, and used it against him. The battle of words had begun with Jin's passionate words, but with Mirai's quiet, sharp sentences, the challenge had changed. It was no longer just a debate. It was becoming something else, something more serious. The real fight, it seemed, was just beginning. The silence in the lecture hall was heavy and complete. The soft blue light seemed to pulse. The strange symbols on the walls glowed. No one moved. All eyes were on the quiet human girl who had just spoken with such cold certainty. Professor Kale, the Zelthorian teacher, stood perfectly still at the front of the room. His gray-plated body was like a statue. His large, multifaceted eyes were fixed on Mirai. The translator around his neck was silent. He seemed to be processing her words. No student had ever spoken to him like that before. Especially not a human. Especially not a female. Finally, a low buzz came from the translator. An intriguing idea, Miss Mirai. The voice was careful, but there was a sharpness underneath. Your passion, like your classmates, is noted. But in this room we deal with proof. Not just passion. Not just feelings. From the front row, a rough laugh broke the quiet. It was Tharok, the Valerian student. The sound was like 2 stones grinding together. She speaks of fighting extinction, he said, his voice loud and mocking. Yet their greatest achievement was passing your gentle species tests. A true warrior does not boast about simply staying alive. A true warrior conquers. Mirai did not look at Tharok. Her gaze stayed on Professor Kale. Her face showed no emotion. It was as calm as a still lake. But Jin, sitting next to her, saw the small change. He saw her lips pressed together into a thin, hard line. He saw her fingers, which had been resting on her datapad, curl slightly. She was not angry. She was focused. She was like a hunter who had just seen her target. Slowly, deliberately, Mirai stood up. She was not very tall, but in that moment she seemed to fill the space around her. All the energy in the room pulled towards her. Then let's move beyond words, she said. Her voice was clear and cut through the air like glass. The university's annual cultural showcase is in 1 week. It is meant to show what makes each species special. Is that correct? Professor Kale tilted his head. He was cautious. It is a celebration. A display of art, science, and advanced philosophy. The highest achievements of a culture. Let's make it more interesting, Mirai said. Her voice changed. It became smoother, almost pleasant, but it had a dangerous edge. I propose a demonstration, a wager. The Valerians are proud of their strength and their survival skills. Humans are adaptable. Let us demonstrate our so-called flaw. Let us show you what it really means. Tharok leaned forward in his seat. His big, scaly hands gripped the edge of his desk. The idea of a challenge appealed to him. What kind of demonstration? He asked, his voice a low rumble. Mirai turned her head just enough to look at him. The gauntlet. A wave of sound went through the classroom. It was not loud. It was a collective gasp. A murmur of disbelief. The gauntlet was not something students talked about lightly. It was the university's most advanced and most dangerous simulator. It was a huge circular room that could create any environment. It was used to test new equipment for explorers. It was used to study alien plants and animals in a safe way. It was not for students. It was famous for being brutally difficult. No student had ever run it without a full team of experts and safety guards. Professor Kale took a step back. The plates on his body shifted with a sharp click. "You are not serious," he buzzed. "The gauntlet is not a game. It is a lethal environment. Without a full support team, it is a death sentence. The university would never allow it. Which is why it is the perfect test," Jin said, suddenly understanding Mirai's plan. He stood up beside her. He felt a surge of energy. This was crazy, but it was also brilliant. He looked at Tharok. "Your warrior against one of us. No weapons from the outside. Just whatever you can find or make inside. The goal is not to fight each other. The goal is to be the first one to reach the extraction point. It is a race. A race against a deadly environment with an opponent running the same race," Tharok scoffed. He looked at Jin and then at Mirai. He smiled a wide, confident smile. "A human against a Valerian in a survival test? It is no contest. My scales are tougher than your skin. My muscles are stronger than your bones. I would win before you took 10 steps. Then you have nothing to lose," Mirai said, her eyes locking back on Professor Kale. Her voice was steady and firm. "If the Valerian wins, you prove your point. Humanity's spirit is a destructive thing from the past. We are volatile. We are a danger. But if the human wins..." She paused, letting the silence build. "Then you must publicly revise your thesis on humanity. You must tell the whole university that you were wrong, and you must recommend our inclusion in the Deep Strike Exploration Corps." The classroom went dead quiet again. The stakes were now incredibly high. The Deep Strike Exploration Corps was the most prestigious organization in the galaxy. It was for the bravest and most capable species. They were the ones who went to the unknown edges of space. Humanity had applied many times. They had been rejected every time. The reason was always the same: psychological volatility. High risk of conflict. Professor Kale was stunned. His long, thin fingers twitched. He looked from Mirai's determined face to Tharok's proud and eager one. He looked at the other students in the room. They were all watching, waiting. The academic part of him was horrified. This was reckless. It was unscientific. It was dangerous. But another part of him, the part that studied species and their behaviors, was deeply fascinated. This was a real-life test. It was a chance to see his theories proven right in front of everyone. He believed with all his being that the Valerian way of direct strength was superior. He believed humanity's adaptability was just a fancy word for chaos. He also believed there was no chance a human could win. He looked at Tharok. "Do you accept this wager, Tharok of Valeria?" Tharok stood up. He was much taller and broader than either human. He cast a large shadow over them. "I accept," he said, his voice booming. "It will be an honor to show the truth of strength." Professor Kale then looked at Mirai. "And you understand the risks? The gauntlet will be set to a high difficulty. It will mimic a real deadly world. There will be real danger. The medical team will be on standby, but they cannot get to you instantly. You could be seriously hurt." Mirai nodded once. "I understand." "Very well," Professor Kale buzzed, making his decision. "The wager is accepted. The demonstration will be the main event of the cultural showcase. The whole university will be watching." He looked at the small group of humans. "Now choose your champion. Which of your people will face the gauntlet?" The other human students looked at each other. Some of the young men who were strong and athletic shifted in their seats. One of them, a boy named Tay, who often exercised in the gym, opened his mouth to volunteer. But Mirai spoke first. She did not look at the strong boys. She did not ask for a volunteer. She simply looked straight at Professor Kale and said in a voice that allowed no argument, "I will do it." A new wave of murmurs spread through the room. Tharok laughed again, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "You? The quiet little female? This is a joke. You will not last a minute. Jin looked at Mirai. He felt a jolt of fear for her. Tharok was right. She was not big. She was not strong. She spent all her time studying. But as he looked at her face, he saw that same cool certainty. She was not being brave. She was being logical. She had a plan. Professor Kell was visibly surprised again. You are sure? This is not a test you can study for, Miss Mirai. I am sure, she said. She finally sat back down as if the matter was completely settled. She turned her attention back to her datapad. The conversation was over. The battle had been declared. It would not be fought with words in a classroom. It would be fought in a deadly artificial world. He, Jin, had begun this battle with a passionate argument. She, Mirai, was going to end it not with more words, but with a fierce and dangerous action. The stage was set. In 1 week, everyone would watch, and everyone would learn what human survival really meant. The day of the cultural showcase arrived. The main arena of the university was packed. Thousands of students and teachers from countless worlds filled the seats. The air hummed with the sounds of different languages. The air smelled of strange foods and alien scents. On the main stage, groups had performed beautiful music and shown amazing art. But everyone knew that was not the main event. Everyone was waiting for the gauntlet. High above the arena floor was a special viewing area. It was for important guests and the teams involved. Professor Kale stood there, his tall, thin frame looking stiff. Next to him was Jin. Jin felt a knot of worry in his stomach. He looked at the huge holographic screen that hung in the center of the arena. The screen was split into 2 parts. One side showed Tharok. The other side showed Mirai. They were in separate preparation rooms. Tharok was stretching. He was jumping up and down. He was hitting his chest with his fists. It was a Valyrian war ritual. He looked powerful and ready for a fight. His green scales shimmered under the bright lights. Mirai's room was different. She was sitting on a small bench. Her eyes were closed. She was taking slow, deep breaths. She was not moving at all. She looked small and calm. She did not look like someone who was about to enter a deadly simulation. An official came into each room. The official gave them both the same simple gray suit to wear. The suit was made of a strong material. It would not tear easily, but it offered no other protection. It had no weapons, no tools, nothing. The rules are simple, a voice said over the loudspeaker. The whole arena went quiet to listen. The gauntlet will last for 1 full cycle. The environment is a simulated Class 12 death world. It is called Vipera. The goal is to survive and reach the extraction point. The first one to touch the beacon wins. There are no rules on how you survive, but you may not directly attack your opponent until you are both within sight of the beacon. Good luck. The doors to the preparation room slid open. A bright light poured out. Tharok let out a loud roar and ran out into his side of the gauntlet. The crowd, especially the Valyrians, cheered loudly. Mirai's door opened. She stood up slowly. She walked out into the light. She did not run. She simply stepped forward and the door closed behind her. The human section of the crowd was silent. They were too nervous to cheer. The holographic screen now showed the world of Vipera. It was a jungle, but it was a nightmare jungle. The plants were mostly purple and black. The trees were twisted. The air was thick with a green, misty fog. Strange, loud cries came from deep within the forest. The ground was covered in thick, spongy moss and sharp-looking vines. Tharok immediately started to move. His strategy was clear. It was pure Valyrian strength. He looked at the small device on his wrist. It had a compass and a small map. It showed the direction of the extraction beacon. It was many miles away. Tharok picked that direction and began to run. He did not go around things. He went through them. When a wall of thick, thorny bushes blocked his path, he lowered his shoulder and smashed through it. The thorns were long and sharp. They scraped against his scales with a horrible sound. A few of them broke, but his scales held. He did not slow down. He came to a small stream. The water was a sickly yellow color. Bubbles rose from the bottom. It was clearly acidic. Tharok did not stop to look for a safe place to cross. He took a running start and jumped. He landed on the other side, his powerful legs easily carrying him across. A few drops of the yellow water splashed on his leg. They sizzled and smoked, leaving small, dark marks on his scales. He grunted in pain but kept running. His screen showed his point of view. It was a shaking, bouncing image of the jungle flying past. It was fast and aggressive. The Valerian fans in the arena cheered with every powerful move he made. Professor Kyle watched Tharok's screen with a look of approval. He turned to Jin. "You see," he said. "Direct action, power. He imposes his will on the environment. He does not let it stop him. This is the strength of a focused species." Jin did not answer. His eyes were fixed on Mirai's screen. Mirai had not moved from her starting point. She was standing completely still just outside her door. Her eyes were not on her wrist device. They were scanning the jungle around her. She was looking at the plants. She was listening to the sounds. She was watching the way the green mist moved through the trees. For a full 5 minutes, she just observed. The crowd began to murmur. Why wasn't she moving? Was she too scared? Then she finally took a step. But she did not run in a straight line like Tharok. She moved to the side towards a large, strange-looking tree. The tree had a bark that peeled away in long strips. Mirai carefully peeled off a few strips of this bark. She rolled them up and tied them around her feet, making simple shoes. The ground was soft and wet. Her standard-issue boots would have sunk in. The bark shoes spread her weight out. She could walk on top of the soft moss without sinking. She still did not run. She began to walk. But her path was not straight towards the beacon. She was moving in a wide curve, staying in the shadows of the large trees. Her movements were silent and smooth. She did not break a single twig. She came to the same acidic stream that Tharok had jumped across. She stopped. She did not try to jump. She walked along the bank, her eyes searching. She found what she was looking for, a grove of tall bamboo-like plants. She spent the next 20 minutes working. She found a sharp-edged stone. She used it to cut down several of the long, hollow reeds. She sat down and began to work with the reeds. She wove them together with tough, flexible vines she found nearby. The crowd watched confused. What was she doing? She was wasting time. After a while, it became clear. She was making a raft. A simple, small raft. She also made a long pole from one of the reeds. When she was finished, she carefully pushed the raft into the yellow water. She used the pole to push herself across the stream. She never touched the toxic water. Her journey across the stream was slow and careful. But it used almost no energy. It was safe. Meanwhile, Tharok's screen showed a new problem. A large, six-legged creature stepped out onto the path in front of him. It was the size of a large bear. It had a wide mouth full of needle-like teeth. It snarled at him, blocking his way. Tharok did not try to go around it. He saw it as a challenge. He roared back at the creature and charged. The fight was short and brutal. The creature was strong, but Tharok was stronger. He grabbed one of its legs and twisted it until the bone snapped. The creature howled in pain. Tharok then used his own head to smash into the creature's face. Again and again. Finally, the creature fell to the ground, unmoving. Tharok stood over the dead animal, his chest heaving. He was bleeding from a few scratches on his arms. He wiped the blood away and let out another triumphant roar. He had conquered the obstacle. He continued his run. The Valerian section of the arena erupted in cheers. This was what they wanted to see. Strength, power, victory, Professor Kale nodded. He dominates every challenge. He shows no fear. This is the correct way to survive. Jin finally spoke, his voice quiet.
He is winning every battle.
But look at the cost. He is using his energy fast. He is getting hurt. The scratches are small now. But what about the next fight? And the one after that? On Mirai's screen, she had her own encounter. A sleek reptilian predator started to follow her. It moved from shadow to shadow. It had long claws and a mouth that dripped with purple venom. Mirai knew it was there. She could hear it. She did not turn to fight it. She did not run. She changed her direction. She led the creature towards a part of the jungle where the ground was covered in pretty red flowers. The creature, focused on its prey, followed her onto the flowery ground. Suddenly, the flowers moved. Long whip-like vines shot up from the ground. They wrapped around the reptile's legs. The creature hissed and struggled, but the vines were strong. They pulled it down towards the center of the flowers. The creature disappeared under the red petals. There was a final choked cry. Then silence. Mirai had not even looked back. She had used the environment itself as her weapon. She had not spent any of her own energy. She had not taken any risk. She had let the dangerous jungle fight for her. She continued her slow, steady, and silent journey. She was not moving in a straight line, but she was moving. And she was perfectly safe and perfectly calm. The real battle for survival had begun. and the two competitors were fighting it in two completely different ways. The gauntlet continued. On the huge screen, the two views showed a story of two different worlds, even though they were the same jungle. The crowd in the arena watched, completely absorbed. They had never seen anything like this. Thyrok's journey was a path of destruction. He was a powerful force moving in a straight line. He had fought two more predators. One was a large flying creature that tried to grab him with its talons. He had grabbed one of its legs and swung it hard against a tree. The other was a pack of small, fast animals that bit at his ankles. He had kicked and stomped until they all ran away. But each fight cost him. His breathing was heavier now. The scratches on his arms and legs were deeper. One of the flying creature's talons had cut a gash on his shoulder. Dark green blood, Valyrian blood, dripped down his arm. He ignored it. He was a warrior. Pain was part of the test. He came to a new obstacle. A wide canyon cut across his path. It was too wide to jump. The sides were steep and rocky. Far below, a river of the same acidic water rushed by. Thyrok looked at his wrist device. The beacon was on the other side. He had to get across. He looked left and right. There was no bridge. There was no easy way. He saw thick vine-like plants hanging down from the trees near the edge. He grabbed one and pulled on it. It seemed strong. This was his plan. He would swing across. He took a running start and leaped off the edge of the cliff, holding onto the vine. For a moment it worked. He swung out over the terrifying drop, but halfway across there was a sharp tearing sound. The vine was not as strong as it looked. It began to rip. Thyrok's eyes went wide. He swung his body hard, trying to get closer to the other side. The vine snapped. He fell. The crowd gasped. But Thyrok was strong and fast. He reached out as he fell, and his fingers caught on a rocky ledge on the canyon wall. He dangled there, high above the acid river. He pulled himself up onto the narrow ledge. He was safe, but he was not across. He was now stuck on the side of a cliff. He would have to climb all the way down or all the way up. It would take a long time and use much of his remaining energy. The Valyrian section of the crowd was quiet now. They watched with worried faces. Professor Kale watched Thyrok struggle. He did not look pleased anymore. He looked concerned. "He is determined," the professor said to Jin. "His strength is impressive." "His strength is why he is stuck on a cliff," Jin replied softly. He nodded towards Mireille's screen. Look, Mireille had also reached the canyon. But she had not reached it in a straight, tired line. Her path had been longer but easier. She had walked along high ground where the jungle was less thick. She had found fruits that were safe to eat and water that was clean to drink. She had taken breaks. She had even slept for a short time, hidden safely in the branches of a tree. So when she arrived at the canyon's edge, she was not tired. She was not hurt. She was calm and rested. She looked at the canyon just as Thyrok had. But she did not look for a vine to swing on. That was too risky. She looked at the canyon wall itself. She studied the rocks. She looked for cracks and ledges. She was not looking for a way to swing across. She was looking for a way to go through. She walked along the edge for almost an hour. The crowd was getting impatient. Why didn't she do something? Then she found it. A dark, narrow opening in the rock face. There was a crack, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze into. It was not obvious. It was hidden behind a curtain of hanging moss. She pushed the moss aside and stepped into the darkness. Her screen went almost black. The only light came from the glowing moss on the walls inside the tunnel. The air was cool and damp. The path was not easy. It went down, then up, and twisted and turned. But it was a path. It was a path that went right through the mountain. She walked for a long time in the quiet, dark tunnel. She did not have to fight anything. She did not have to risk a dangerous swing. She simply walked. She was safe from the dangers of the jungle outside. When she finally saw light ahead and stepped out of the tunnel, she was on the other side of the canyon. She had crossed the huge obstacle without a fight, without a single drop of sweat. She had simply found a smarter way. She was now ahead of Thyrok. The human section of the crowd began to cheer. It was not a loud, wild cheer like the Valyrians. It was a cheer of hope and growing excitement. Thyrok finally managed to climb down the canyon wall. He had to walk through the acidic river at the bottom. The water was shallow, but it burned his legs and feet terribly. He roared in pain and anger, but he forced himself to walk through it. He then had to climb up the other side. It took him many hours. When he finally pulled himself over the top, he was exhausted. His body was covered in cuts and burns. His energy was almost gone. He looked at his wrist device. The extraction beacon was close now. He could win this. He just had to keep going. He started to run again, but his run was now a slow, painful jog. Mireille, on the other hand, was moving faster now. The end was near. The jungle here was even more dangerous. The plants were stranger. The sounds were more threatening. She knew she was close to the beacon. She also knew Tharok was behind her. But he was still a threat. She could not be careless. She stopped by a plant with large, beautiful blue leaves. The leaves were covered in a sticky, clear liquid. She used a piece of bark to carefully collect some of this liquid. She then found a straight, strong branch. She used a sharp stone to sharpen one end of the branch into a point. She dipped the point into the sticky liquid, coating it carefully. She had made a spear, and she had poisoned the tip. She did not plan to attack Tharok. She planned to be ready if he attacked her. She continued forward, her homemade spear held lightly in her hand. The final part of the journey was a wide, rocky clearing. In the center of the clearing, on a tall, flat stone, was the extraction beacon. It was a simple metal pole with a blue light glowing at the top. The first one to touch it would win. Mireille stepped out of the jungle and into the clearing. She could see the beacon. She was so close. She started to walk towards it, her heart beating fast. But at that moment, Tharok burst out from the other side of the clearing. He saw her. He saw the beacon. A furious roar erupted from his throat. He had struggled so hard. He had suffered so much. And this small, quiet human female was about to take his victory. He forgot the rule about not attacking until they were both in the clearing. He was too angry. He was too tired. He saw his chance. He charged at her. He was big and fast even when injured. He wanted to knock her out of the way. He wanted to be the first to touch the beacon. The crowd in the arena screamed. It was all happening so fast, Mireille saw him coming. She stopped walking. She did not run. She turned to face him. She held her simple, poison-tipped spear ready. She stood her ground, waiting for him. The final part of the battle was about to begin. Not against the jungle, but against the warrior who had fought it so fiercely. Tharok charged across the rocky clearing. His body was a mass of cuts and burns. His green blood stained his gray suit. His breath came in ragged, painful gasps. But his anger gave him strength. He saw the small human female standing between him and the beacon. He saw the simple sharpened stick in her hand. It was a joke. He would break it, and her with one blow. The crowd in the arena was on its feet. A loud roar of mixed shock and excitement filled the air. This was not part of the plan. This was a direct attack. Mireille did not run. She stood perfectly still. Her feet were planted firmly on the ground. She held the spear lightly, its poison-tipped point aimed at the charging Valyrian. Her face was calm. Her eyes were focused. She looked like a rock in the middle of a raging river. Professor Kale stared at the screen, his body rigid. This was the violence he had always talked about. This was the primitive conflict. But it was the Valyrian who started it. The human was just standing there, defending herself. Jin held his breath. His hands were clenched into tight fists. He wanted to shout, to warn her, but he could only watch. Tharok was almost upon her. He was much bigger. He was much stronger. He swung a massive, scaly arm to knock the spear aside and grab her. At the very last second, Mireille moved. She did not try to stab him. She did not meet his strength with her own. That would have been foolish. Instead, she sidestepped with a quick, smooth motion. She was like water flowing around a stone. Tharok, expecting to hit something, stumbled forward. His own power worked against him. As he stumbled past her, Mireille moved her spear. She did not thrust it hard. She simply tapped the back of his knee with the poisoned tip. It was a small, precise movement. It looked almost gentle. Tharok took one more step. Then his leg stopped working. The neurotoxin from the plant acted instantly. His muscles locked up. His leg became stiff as a board. He cried out in surprise and pain as he crashed heavily to the ground. He tried to get up, but his leg would not obey. He could only lie there, helpless, on the rocks. The arena fell into a stunned silence. Mireille did not look at him with anger or triumph. She simply glanced down to make sure he was no longer a threat. Then she turned her back on him. She walked the final few steps to the extraction beacon. The blue light glowed brightly. She reached out her hand and placed her palm flat against the cool metal pole. A loud, clear tone sounded throughout the arena and the simulation. A message flashed on the big screen in bright letters. Simulation complete. Victor, human contestant. For a moment, there was no sound. Then a wave of noise erupted from the human section. It was not the aggressive roar of the Valerians. It was a cheer of pure, overwhelming relief and pride. They were shouting and hugging each other. They had won. In the simulation, the jungle world of Vipera faded away. The rocky clearing, the trees, the green mist all dissolved into nothing. They were back in the huge circular gauntlet room. The walls were plain gray metal. The air was clean and cool. Medical teams rushed onto the floor. They went to Tharok first. They applied a counteragent to his leg. The paralysis faded quickly, but the shame remained on his face. He would not look at anyone. He let the medics help him to his feet and lead him away. Mirai stood alone by the now inert beacon. She still held her homemade spear. She looked small and tired, but her head was held high. Professor Kale was still in the viewing area. He had not moved. He was staring at the empty space where the holographic screen had been. His theory, his life's work, was shattered. He had been so wrong. The human did not win with brute force. She did not win by being the most destructive. She won by being the smartest. She won by understanding the world better than anyone else. Jin walked over to the professor. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not need to. The truth was right in front of them. He spoke in a quiet voice. "You said our fighting spirit was a flaw. You were wrong. Tharok's way is to meet the enemy's strength with greater strength. It is an honorable way. But humanity's way, the battle we have been fighting since we lived in caves, is the battle of the mind against the impossible. It is the battle to find a way when there is no way. We do not just endure, we adapt. We do not just conquer the environment. We learn its language. We make it speak for us." Down on the arena floor, Mirai was surrounded by people. Reporters were asking her questions. Cameras were flashing. She ignored them all. She was looking for one person. Her eyes found Jin in the viewing area. She gave him a small, tired smile. He smiled back, a wide, proud smile. She then turned her gaze to Professor Kyle. She did not speak, but her look said everything. It was a look of quiet, fierce certainty. The professor finally moved. He walked slowly down to the arena floor. The crowd parted for him. He walked up to Mirai. He looked at the simple spear she still held. He looked at her calm, determined face. He, a senior Zelthorian professor, then did something no one had ever seen him do. He bowed. It was a deep, formal bow of great respect. "Miss Mirai," he said, his buzzing voice now soft and full of wonder, "the wager is settled. You have won. Your demonstration was educational. I was wrong. I will keep my promise. I will revise my thesis, and I will personally recommend humanity for the Deep Strike Exploration Corps. Your species does not just belong there. You may be the most important species there." Mirai finally dropped her spear. It clattered on the floor. The sound echoed in the quiet arena. "He began the battle in your classroom with a debate about spirit," she said, her voice clear and strong for all to hear. "I ended it here fiercely by showing you what that spirit truly is. It is the relentless, unforgiving will to survive, not through destruction but through intelligence. We are not just fighters. We are survivors, and the universe has never produced a more dangerous one." The story of what happened spread across the university like fire. The quiet human girl who faced the gauntlet. The professor who had to change his mind. The Valerian warrior who was defeated not by strength but by wisdom. Jin had begun the battle with his words, defending his people's heart. But Mirai had ended it. She ended it not with a loud argument but with a quiet, fierce, and undeniable truth. She had shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon was not in their hands but in their minds. And that was a weapon that could never be taken away.